Manipulation rarely arrives as open confrontation. It does not shout. It whispers. It reframes conversations subtly, plants doubt quietly. It isolates without declaring war. By the time you realize something has shifted, the room already feels different. This is the quiet war of perception. Most men expect conflict to be direct. They prepare for argument, not narrative. But social outcomes are rarely determined by truth alone. They are shaped by interpretation, by tone, by repetition, by the story others begin to believe. Few men understand that when narrative shifts, hierarchy shifts. The moment perception tilts against you, your position weakens, not because you are wrong, but because you are misunderstood. In this kind of warfare, reaction becomes evidence. Over-defending confirms instability. Emotional urgency reinforces suspicion. What feels like self-protection can become self-sabotage. Perception, not facts, often governs status. If you do not understand this dynamic, you fight the wrong battle. And in fighting the wrong battle, you strengthen the very narrative working against you. Manipulators rarely attack your character openly. They distort it indirectly. The strategy is not confrontation. It is projection. Projection allows them to assign their own insecurities or intentions onto you. If they feel threatened, they subtly frame you as aggressive. If they act strategically, they accuse you of scheming. The accusation disarms scrutiny. Attention shifts away from their behavior and toward your supposed flaws. Narrative distortion follows. A small disagreement becomes a pattern. A moment of frustration becomes a personality trait. Through selective framing, they highlight fragments that support their version while omitting context that would balance it. The story spreads not because it is accurate, but because it is repeated. Social contagion amplifies the effect. People rarely verify every claim. They calibrate their perception based on group sentiment. When enough individuals subtly adjust their tone toward you, hesitation spreads, doubt multiplies. The room feels colder without any single confrontation. Reputation, especially in social or professional environments, is fragile. It depends less on grand gestures and more on consistent perception. A manipulator understands this fragility and applies pressure gradually. Contrast this with direct conflict. In open confrontation, positions are clear. Accusations can be addressed. In covert manipulation, ambiguity reigns. You cannot easily defend against whispers without appearing defensive. Confusion is common in these moments. You sense the shift but struggle to identify its source. Understanding the mechanics reframes the experience. It is not chaos. It is narrative warfare. And recognizing it is the first step toward regaining control. When the narrative begins to turn, the instinct is immediate defense. You clarify, you explain, you confront, you attempt to restore equilibrium through exposure of truth. Yet in many cases, this reaction strengthens the distortion. Emotional leakage is the first vulnerability. Visible frustration, urgency in tone, or agitation in posture signals disturbance. Observers may not analyze your words deeply, but they register instability. Instability becomes evidence. Desperation signals follow. When you chase conversations, demand clarification, or attempt to correct every rumor, you unintentionally communicate fear. Fear confirms suspicion. It suggests there is something to defend. Overexplanation compounds the issue. Lengthy justifications create the appearance of guilt even when none exists. In perception warfare, brevity signals confidence. Excessive defense signals vulnerability. Public validation seeking deepens the trap. Attempting to rally allies loudly often appears reactive. It forces people to choose sides prematurely. Those who hesitate may distance themselves further to avoid entanglement. When you fight emotionally, you confirm instability. The manipulator's frame often portrays you as volatile, defensive, or insecure. An emotionally charged response reinforces that image. Even if your argument is rational, the delivery overshadows the content. This is the escalation point. Reacting intensifies the narrative. It shifts attention from the manipulator's tactics to your composure. The stakes are not merely social tension. They are structural. Authority erodes when stability erodes. And once perception settles, reversing it requires far greater effort than preserving it would have. If manipulation is narrative warfare, the countermove is not louder argument. It is stabilization followed by repositioning. The first principle is emotional non-reactivity. Do not chase the story. Do not respond to every distortion. When you resist the urge to defend impulsively, you interrupt the momentum of the narrative. Panic fuels rumor. Stability starves it. Do not overdefend. Overdefense implies threat. Calm brevity implies confidence. If clarification is necessary, deliver it measured and once. Then return to consistent behavior. The objective is not to win a debate. It is to maintain structural integrity. Behavioral consistency becomes your anchor. When your conduct remains aligned with your values, the manipulator's narrative begins to conflict with observable reality. People recalibrate slowly. They compare words to patterns. Consistency dissolves exaggeration over time. Quietly strengthen alliances, not through public declarations but through private reliability. Continue delivering value. Continue honoring commitments. Reinforce trust through action rather than rhetoric. Reputation is rebuilt in silence. Contrast panic defense with disciplined recalibration. Panic seeks immediate correction. It reacts to every whisper. Disciplined recalibration absorbs pressure and adjusts position calmly. It understands that perception shifts gradually and must be countered gradually. Few men recognize that the most powerful response is often absence of visible disturbance. When you stabilize first and reposition strategically, you regain agency. The narrative loses force when you refuse to energize it. Control returns when your internal state remains intact. Stability precedes recovery. Recovery restores authority. Manipulators depend on emotional disruption. Their leverage emerges when your internal state shifts visibly. Agitation gives them momentum. Urgency gives them control. Without reaction, their tactics lose precision. What they fear most is predictable calm. When your responses remain steady across situations, the environment becomes less responsive to provocation. Stability denies them the emotional access they rely upon. They also fear consistent integrity. Integrity is not loud declaration. It is pattern. When your behavior aligns consistently with your stated values, narrative distortion struggles to survive. People eventually compare accusation with observable conduct. Long-term reputation is another threat to manipulation. Reputation compounds slowly but resists sudden distortion. If you have established reliability over time, sudden narrative shifts encounter resistance. History becomes your defense. Most of all, manipulators fear lack of visible reaction. Reaction validates their effort. Silence forces uncertainty. Uncertainty disrupts strategy. If you cannot be destabilized, you cannot be controlled. Power in these situations does not come from confrontation. Comes from containment. The absence of emotional volatility reverses leverage quietly. When your identity remains stable under pressure, perceived power shifts. The manipulator's influence weakens. Stability becomes resistance. Few men understand that composure is not passive. It is protective. And protection preserves authority over time. Pause and examine your own reactions. When narrative pressure builds, do you rush to explain yourself? Do you feel compelled to correct every whisper? Respond to every distortion? Defend every misunderstanding? Notice what shifts first. Does your posture tighten? Does your tone sharpen? Does your focus narrow toward restoring approval? Ask yourself honestly. Who controls your reputation? Your behavior or your fear? If your internal state is dictated by the possibility of rejection, then perception owns you. If your conduct remains stable regardless of rumor, then you own perception. Few men withstand narrative pressure without collapsing into urgency. Feels instinctive to defend. Feels necessary to respond. But urgency often signals instability. Observe your impulses without judgment. Study where panic emerges. Notice how quickly you seek reassurance. These signals reveal the depth of your internal anchoring. Sovereignty begins when fear of misinterpretation no longer dictates your behavior. Reputation is built over time through consistency, not through reactive correction. If narrative pressure shakes you, it reveals where discipline must deepen. Awareness is the first form of control, and control begins within. Reputation is rarely repaired through a single statement. It is rebuilt through pattern. Stability must be visible long enough to counter distortion. Consistency is the first pillar. Continue behaving in alignment with your values. Deliver on commitments. Maintain discipline in tone and action. Over time, repeated exposure to steady conduct challenges narrative exaggeration. Visible composure strengthens this effect. When you remain measured in conversations where tension lingers, observers recalibrate silently. They compare rumor with reality. The absence of volatility becomes evidence. Strategic silence plays a critical role. Not every accusation deserves amplification. Public defense often spreads narrative further. Silence, when combined with consistent behavior, forces speculation to fade. Attention moves toward new stimuli. When correction is necessary, choose private dialogue over public confrontation. Direct clarification preserves dignity. Public defense invites escalation. Quiet conversations carry more credibility than visible argument. Rebuilding perception is slow. Few men possess patience for gradual restoration. They seek immediate vindication, but perception shifts incrementally. Stability must outlast distortion. Reputation compounds through stability in the same way trust compounds through reliability. Each composed interaction strengthens your structural position. Long-term thinking reframes urgency. The goal is not immediate victory. It is enduring authority. Patience becomes strategy. Discipline becomes protection. Over time, narrative loses momentum when behavior remains anchored, and anchored behavior reshapes perception quietly. Zoom out from the individual exchange and observe the environment we inhabit. We live in a culture that believes the first story it hears. Social media amplifies narrative faster than correction can travel. Speed replaces verification. Emotion replaces reflection. Rapid judgment culture rewards immediacy. A single accusation circulates instantly. Context rarely keeps pace. Emotional contagion spreads through repetition, not accuracy. The louder the reaction, the more attention it receives. Narrative dominance shapes perception long before truth stabilizes. In such an environment, defending yourself emotionally often reinforces spectacle. The algorithm favors volatility, not composure. Contrast this reactive culture with the disciplined minority. While many rush to comment and react, a smaller group remains measured. They understand that reaction fuels amplification. They recognize that stability, though slower, is structurally stronger. Few men understand that in a culture addicted to impulse, discipline becomes rare, and rarity increases value. When the world believes the first story, authority belongs to those who do not rush to narrate their own defense. Stability outlasts spectacle, and spectacle eventually collapses under its own noise. There is a kind of man who cannot be framed easily, not because he fights harder, but because he does not chase validation. His sense of identity does not depend on immediate approval from the room. When narrative pressure builds, he does not defend impulsively. He does not rush to correct every whisper. He understands that frantic defense signals vulnerability. Instead, he allows his behavior to speak over time. Stability becomes his counterargument. Under scrutiny, he governs his reactions deliberately. He does not flinch when questioned. He does not escalate when misunderstood. His composure remains intact even when tension rises. Observers register this steadiness. Perception recalibrates around it. Authority grows when instability is absent. When emotional volatility disappears, leverage disappears with it. Others begin to hesitate before challenging someone who cannot be unsettled. This man does not seek to dominate the narrative. He maintains alignment between his conduct and his principles. Over time, consistency dismantles distortion. Few men understand that framing only succeeds against identities that require external affirmation. The man anchored in self-governance becomes difficult to misrepresent. He is not loud. He is not reactive. He is not desperate to be believed. He is stable, and stability in a volatile world becomes power. When someone attempts to turn the room against you, the instinct is immediate correction. You feel the urge to clarify, defend, restore balance. But narrative attacks succeed only when you destabilize. If you remain steady, the structure holds. Stillness under accusation is not surrender. It is strength contained. When you refuse to amplify distortion with emotional urgency, you deny the narrative its fuel. Composure under scrutiny communicates that your identity does not hinge on momentary perception. Behavior outlasts explanation. Words may circulate quickly, but consistent conduct persists. When your actions remain aligned with your principles, over time the contrast becomes visible. Stability exposes exaggeration. The room watches more than it listens. It reads posture, tone, and reaction. If you remain grounded while tension rises, observers recalibrate quietly. They sense the absence of instability. Few men understand that authority is preserved not through argument, but through discipline. The next time narrative shifts against you, observe before acting. Notice the surge. Notice the impulse to defend. Then choose deliberately. Choose steadiness. Choose restraint. In volatile moments, the man who governs himself governs the outcome. Beyond the struggle, where discipline replaces impulse, and clarity replaces chaos.